Hi friends, welcome to Raising Lifelong Learners. I'm your host, Colleen Kessler, and this is the podcast where I encourage you to trust yourself and your differently wired kiddos as you help cultivate their curiosity, encourage them to discover the world around them, embrace who they are wired to be, all while helping them discover their passions, interests, and raise them to become the amazing adults they're meant to be. Hey, welcome back. This is episode 310. Today we are talking all about when our kids are happier alone, when they prefer to be by themselves and not in large groups. It is episode number 4 in our series all about social life and friendships for our neurodivergent kids, and a really important one, especially for those of us who either personally or have spouses who are really bothered by the fact that our neurodivergent kiddos don't make friends in the same way that we did as kids or as we hoped that they would as kids. Really important episode with lots and lots of nuggets that you can take away. So make sure that you have a chance to really focus on this. There'll be lots of information in the show notes for this episode over at raisinglifelonglearners.com. So you're not going to want to miss that. You're going to want to make sure that you click through. And that way you don't have to take notes either, because there'll be a whole article about this topic as well as links to further reading and further listening about it. Okay, before we get started, I want to thank CTC Math for their continued sponsorship. We really appreciate them. You'll hear more about them later on in this episode, but check them out, ctcmath.com, best math program that's out there by far. Also, Curiosity Post. It is a snail mail club for kids. So getting our kiddos off screens and just enjoying the things about real life, like real mail. Once a month, they'll get an envelope in the mail that has a card dedicated to a social and emotional theme, a theme that complements what's going on in the Learner's Lab, but doesn't replace it or doesn't overshadow anything. They can be used together in a complementary fashion if you are a member of both, but they follow the same theme. So your kiddos will get a card filled with journal prompts and a game or activity on the back of the card for them to do in real time with real people. They'll get a postcard that they are encouraged to mail out to somebody to keep themselves going with that whole pen pal type thing, along with some fun surprises like stickers, bookmarks, fidget strips. This last month, they got a set of punch cards to reward themselves every time they followed along with the social and emotional theme, and a crossword puzzle. So you never know what's going to come in there, but they'll always get a journal, journaling prompts, and a hands-on activity with a bunch of fun surprises. Only $12 a month, and you can save money by subscribing either quarterly or annually too. So check that out over on the show notes for this episode. All right, pop those earbuds in, take a walk, get some laundry done, whatever you need to do. But let's get on with today's episode. Okay, so if your kiddo has ever said, I don't want friends, or I'm just happier by myself, and you felt both relief and fear at the same time, you're not alone. Today we're talking about solitude, when it's healthy, when it's protective, and how to support connection without forcing your kiddos to become someone that they're not. We want to make sure that we're respecting the kids that are in front of us. We're helping them to have the best possible life they can have while honoring who they are in the process. So this is episode 4 in our series, our 5-episode series all about social life and friendship for neurodivergent kiddos. And this is for you especially if you have kiddos who genuinely enjoy being alone, or resist social interactions and invitations, say that they don't need friends, or seem content, but you feel uneasy about it. Some of the things that we'll talk about today and that you'll get from this episode are how to tell the difference between chosen solitude and protective withdrawal. You'll find out how to respect your child's autonomy, but also keep social connection access available, how to reduce pressure without removing opportunity for your kiddos, and how to support long-term social well-being without forcing friendships on those kiddos who are just really resistant or don't care to have a lot of social interaction. Okay, so why do we even need to deal with this? Solitude is often misunderstood in our neurodivergent kids. Sometimes it's just who they are. They need fewer people, but they need deeper connections. Sometimes it's a protective measure because they don't really know how to interact with others, or they don't really want to because it feels overwhelming and scared. And we just need to figure out as parents how to decipher which it is we're dealing with. And in our culture, it's often misunderstood because sociable culturally tends to equal healthy. Outgoing socially tends to equal success, and lots of friends equals thriving. But for many neurodivergent kids, solitude is regulating, and quiet restores energy. And being alone feels safe and predictable, especially for autistic kiddos, gifted kids with asynchronous development, kids who have anxiety or sensory sensitivities, or kids who have been socially burned before. Solitude isn't the absence of connection. Sometimes it's how neurodivergent kids recover from connection or recover from situations that feel scary or unsafe to them. But we need to decipher what we're dealing with. Are we dealing with solitude, which is a choice, or are we dealing with isolation, which can be unhealthy? That's the heart of what we're going to try to get to in this episode. So, solitude is chosen, it's restorative, it's flexible, and it doesn't come with shame. Your kiddos don't feel badly about the solitude that they're choosing. Signs of healthy solitude include your kiddo engaging happily in things that interest them, that their mood is generally pretty stable, that they can tolerate brief social interactions, and that they're open to connection in their own way. Isolation, on the other hand, is driven by fear, shame, or even overwhelm. It can be rigid, like never, or I always prefer to be alone, or I never want to go to that again. It's also paired with sadness, anger, or hopelessness. And it can create a shrinking world over time where your kids shrink and shrink until they're like down to the four walls of their room. Signs that isolation might be creeping in include increasing avoidance of social contact, negative self-talk, nobody likes me, or they just think I'm stupid anyway, distress when connection is mentioned, and the loss of joy in activities they used to really enjoy being a part of or that they preferred doing. We don't intervene because a child is alone. We want to intervene when our kids are hurting and when we see that the isolation is taking place and keeping them from things they once loved doing or opportunities that you know that they would like and enjoy and would be good for them. We need to understand what our kiddos are going through and how they're communicating with us and why the statement, I'm happy alone, can mean many different things, how we can figure out what it means when our kiddos are telling us that. When kids say they're happier alone, they could be saying, I'm overstimulated, or I don't feel safe socially right now. Maybe the situation that they're a part of isn't a safe situation because there's somebody who's bullying them there, or they haven't really found somebody that they've made a connection with, or it doesn't feel like a good place. It doesn't feel like a place they want to spend time. And they can't quite articulate that. So they instead say, I'm just happier being alone. Maybe it's, I need control over my time. They feel like they're being pushed in too many different directions. One of my kids had a summer job last year, and they ended up working a lot more than we anticipated when we filled out the availability framework. We thought that filling out more availability would just mean more flexibility in the scheduling, but they really enjoyed this particular kid of mine and instead scheduled them for every available time slot that they put on their schedule, like survey. And so that particular child has been a little bit nervous getting closer and closer to the spring and the summer season because the opportunity to apply for those summer jobs again are coming up and they are worried that they'll lose their whole summer again. And they were describing this to me the other day that they think that they have a little bit of kind of PTSD from the summer because they went from not working at all to working 35 hours a week at the job that paid them, and then still doing a volunteer program for 6 to 12 hours a week. So they were working more than full-time hours for 3 straight months after not having worked at all ever. So it was a very abrupt transition to being a worker, and it was very overwhelming and left very little time for the downtime that this particular child needs in their day. And it may just mean I'm happier alone, or I don't want to do anything, could just mean I need more control over my schedule. It could mean socializing costs more than it gives. I have to really work hard at socializing, and I don't get enough out of it to make it feel like that hard is worth it. It could also mean I'm just protecting myself. All of those deserve our respect. All of those deserve to get to the bottom of, so we know how to help our child when and if they need help. When we're trying to figure out what's going on with our kids, is this a situation where they just crave solitude to recharge, or is this a situation where they're isolating in self-preservation or protection, or because whatever is going on makes them feel unsafe? We want to approach the situation with curiosity and not correction. So we want to probe a little bit by asking them some open-ended questions. What do you like best about being alone? What are some things that make you prefer the solitude that you're craving? What feels hardest about being with people? What helps you feel calm after being around people? Do you need time to recharge after you've been around people? How can you recharge? What kinds of things do you prefer doing if you don't prefer to spend time with people? And here's a key. I try to do this. I will be completely honest. I often shift into problem-solving mode with my kids because I want to help them have a great life. I want to help them have an easier life. And so my natural inclination is to fix things. But I try really hard to do what I'm about to tell you to do. I also talk to my husband about this all the time because he definitely is the opposite and could benefit from doing this more often. If you don't take anything else away from this episode, take this. Listen more than you talk. When you're trying to figure out what makes your kid tick, is this solitude or isolation? Is this unhealthy or healthy? Is this a kiddo who really just is introverted and needs the alone time, the solitude to recharge and be able to then be better in a social situation? Or is it a kiddo who really just doesn't want to be around anybody because it feels unsafe? You need to ask open-ended questions. You need to listen more than you talk. Don't go into it trying to solve the problem, correct the issue. Go into it with genuine curiosity and the idea that listening will give you insight into who your kiddo is, what makes them tick, and how you can support them to be the best versions of themselves possible. Because ultimately, that's what we want. We want our kids to be the best versions of themselves, and we want to help them achieve that. Our kids are made perfectly, wonderfully, beautifully in exactly who they're meant to be. And you are made exactly, perfectly, genuinely the best parent for those kids. And so when we listen to who they are based on who they were meant to be, we, in the knowledge that we've grown up with, are able to then help them find the pathway to use the gifts, the insight, the empathy, the characteristics that they have that make them, and to use them in a way that allows them to be the best version of themselves. So we really want to make sure that we're supporting their solitude without closing doors. We're listening more than we talk. And then as we're helping them become the best version of themselves, if that is honoring the solitude that they crave, we're doing it in a way that doesn't close doors or opportunities. This is where balance lives.
Okay, so let's talk about math. Specifically, let's talk about finding a program that actually works for your unique homeschoolers. In our house, we've been using CTC Math for years, and even though I am so appreciative that they sponsor this podcast, I am a paying customer. I'm still a paying customer even with their sponsorship because it's just that good, and I love supporting great companies with great programs. With 2 kids still at home, both with very different learning needs, CTC Math has been the flexible and dependable solution that I keep coming back to. One of my kiddos needs more time to process math concepts, and I love that she can move through the lessons at her own pace without feeling rushed or behind. My other kiddo, he flies. He jumps straight to the end of unit tests to see what he already knows, and then we only focus on the lessons that fill the gaps. That kind of customization is gold when you're homeschooling gifted or twice exceptional kids. CTC Math gives you the access to every grade level, from kindergarten through 12th grade with your subscription, so that your child can accelerate, review, or jump around based on their own needs, not based on some rigid curriculum structure. And because it's video-based with clear instruction and auto-graded lessons and quizzes, it frees me up to support my kids without being chained to a textbook, teacher's manual, or whiteboard. So whether your child needs more time or is racing ahead, you can tailor it all with CTC Math. Check it out at ctcmath.com. You will see why so many homeschool families trust it. And if you've got quirky math learners like I do, I think you're going to love it. If you have any questions about CTC, like I said, we've been using it for years in our homeschool, and I encourage you to reach out and ask me any questions that you have. If you do pop over there, let them know that I sent you, and let them know that you appreciate their ongoing support of homeschoolers everywhere, especially those of you here at Raising Lifelong Learners. All right, let's get back to today's episode.
Okay, so how do we do that? How do we find that balance, keep that balance, and support their need for solitude without closing doors and opportunities and without helping them slide into isolation? What we shouldn't do first, let's start with what not to do. We should not force frequent social exposure. That doesn't mean we let them stay at home all the time, but it means we don't force situations. If something's really not working, we need to find a way to get them out of that situation. We do it in a way that allows them to take breaks. I've got one kid who sometimes needs breaks, and we're at a co-op right now. Neither of the two children that I'm still homeschooling are in any of the classes that I'm currently teaching, but one of the kids has the open-ended invitation to come help me in my class because it is a topic they're very interested in if they feel that they need a break from the class that they're currently in or the people that they're currently around. Not because the people aren't great. The people are actually really great, but because that particular child often feels overwhelmed and tired when trying to be social. That is a child who really needs solitude to recharge or needs to be in their own wheelhouse in a situation where the topic is something that they know about really well, or they know, or they feel passionate or passion towards. And so they have an open invitation. In fact, last week I ended up calling for that particular child because I was having trouble with a certain part of my class and needed them to help extricate an organism from a situation it had gotten itself into. I'm teaching a class I've taught before, actually, using a science kit from Carolina Biological, which is a supplier of science materials, including living organisms, to schools and educational facilities. It's about the microecosystem, a rotting log, like nurse logs in the forest, and it is a kit that comes with rotting wood pieces and moss and soil and several organisms, including some pretty big beetles and worms and little beetles and millipedes and just different things. And one of the organisms, an organism I don't particularly love. I really like a couple of the organisms in this kit, which is why I've taught this particular class. Over the decades I've been teaching in classrooms and co-op situations, I think this is the 5th time I've taught this class. This particular bug is one that I'm not super keen on. It's about a 2.5-inch beetle, and it got itself stuck in a hole in one of the logs. And like, we really couldn't get it out. The fear, it was burrowing itself further and further into this hole, and it got its head stuck. And if we had tried to pull it out, we could have very easily severed its head from its abdomen. And so I sent an SOS to get her to come in, and she helped chip away while I continued teaching the class at the wood surrounding this beetle's head and helped extricate it from its hole. So we have some built-in, I don't expect everybody to have that particular type of built-in situation where that child can extricate themselves from a class situation and take a break and get some solitude, but you want to make sure that you're not forcing social exposure and you're giving them opportunities to pull themselves away for a brief time if they need to. We also don't want to lecture about making friends. This always backfires. It always ends up making our children feel badly about themselves. A kiddo who wants to make friends knows that they're having trouble making friends and they feel badly about it. A kiddo who really doesn't want to make any more friends than they currently have is going to feel like there's something wrong with them if we're continuing to harp on the idea that they need more friends. In fact, one of my older kids and I were talking about this recently because friendship can be very different for neurodivergent individuals. Some, especially our gifted and twice exceptional kids, really seek friendships with academic or cognitive peers. They want friendships with people who challenge their thinking and their brain more so than have similar interests, though that can be a part of it, or are age related. They do better with a variety of ages as long as the intellect is similar. Whereas some of our other neurodivergent kids, maybe those who have anxiety or those who are autistic or have sensory challenges, might do better with younger kids because they can take on like a more nurturing role. And then some kids just want one or two really close friends because they crave the depth of friendship and connection and don't do well with the surfacey kind of connection that you get with acquaintances. And so you want to make sure that you're honoring the kid that you have in front of you and not lecturing them about needing friends or needing more friends, because it's almost always going to backfire in whichever way it ends up backfiring. We also don't want to remove solitude as a consequence. We don't want to say to our kids, you've been alone too much lately. You have to go with us to this thing. Or we're going to go to this homeschool dance and you're going to suck it up because you've been alone too much. Like, we never want to remove solitude, if it's truly solitude and not isolation, as a consequence for behavior, because this is not a behavioral thing. This is a protection measure if they are isolating. And so we want to make sure that we're being supportive and we're not doing these heavy-handed things. We also don't want to compare them to their siblings or their peers. Some kids are just naturally more outgoing than others. They're more extroverted, or they need a large group of acquaintances instead of a small group or one or two friends. And that's okay that everybody's different. I've said this before. I will say this. I say this to my kids all the time. I say this to the students that I teach in the Learners Lab. Life would be really boring if we were all the same. And so we have to respect and honor the fact that we are all different. And one of those differences is how many friends or acquaintances we each need and how we make those friends. And so we want to make sure that we're not doing those things. We're not forcing social exposure. We're not lecturing about needing friends. We're not comparing to siblings or peers, and we're not removing solitude as a consequence for behavior. Instead, let's keep some of those low demand connection options available. We want to offer invitations without pressure. We want to respect not now without interpreting it as never. We want to let them know the different options for things that are coming up and see what they're interested in, and maybe balance that between some things like a homeschool dance or a homeschool club or a co-op mixer at the end of co-op, or a small group playing games at one of the co-op families' houses, or a field trip where you're going to a play with maybe some other people in your bigger group, but you can sit with your family. So different kinds of exposure, different kinds of options, so they can pick what feels less demanding to them and more safe and accessible. And so we want to make sure that we're being helpful, we're being kind, we're being understanding, we're being empathetic, and we're giving them options. Some helpful language that you could potentially use if you're struggling with this with your kiddos. You don't have to decide forever. You can tell them that if you're not sure that you want to be a part of this group right now, that's okay. We want to make sure that we're not like just hiding out in our room all the time. So we're going to go do some things, but we could do things like in a bigger group instead of in classes where I'm dropping you off or whatever. We can keep this option open and come back to it another time. We can hold our place in this group and come back to it if we need to. Or I'll let you know what's available, what kinds of options we have for social interaction, and you decide what feels safe to you. Think of yourself as a quiet bridge from activity to activity and option to option, and not the driver of what's going to happen. And this is particularly important as your kids get older. I think when our kids are younger, especially in a homeschool setting, we are the driver of the schedule and the organization and the activities and the co-ops and the classes. And in some ways, that's both harder and easier than it is when they're older, when they're the drivers. And I look back and I think about some of the ways my homeschool was so much easier when all four of my children were younger and all four of them were home. I could pick the activities they tried and I could do it around my schedule, and I could do it where they were all going to the same thing at once. So I had one drop off and one pickup. Or we were part of a co-op where they had different activities within the co-op, but we were all in the same place at the same time. And then as they got older, and this one was into theater, and this one was into Girl Scouts, and this one was into videography, and this one was into hip hop. Everybody's classes, everybody's groups, everybody's meetups, everybody's rehearsals were at all different times. And so it was more of a divide and conquer. And my schedule had to fit in the margins of where I had to have everybody be at different times. And in some ways, that's easier because they're choosing what they're interested in. And you're not worried about finding the different things that they need to be a part of. But in other ways, it's much more difficult because you don't get a say. You just have to figure out ways to get everybody to where they need to be. And you're, especially when they're older, being like the bridge from activity to activity and not the driver of what they're choosing. But even when they're younger, think about yourself as bridging them to figuring out what makes them tick or what they enjoy doing or maybe what their passions are. Give them lots of exposures and then let them drive what really gets them excited. Some low pressure ways to keep those social muscles warm when they'd rather just keep to themselves, because even kiddos who love solitude benefit from light social contact. Because even kiddos who love solitude benefit from light social contact. Some things that might feel safer to them are like interest-based activities or shorter interactions. One of the things we love about the particular Girl Scout troop that my 10th grader is a part of is that it's very low impact. It's a group that meets semi-regularly, but not regularly. That fits our schedule right now. It's not like a hardcore every Saturday from X time to X time. It's more of when we've got something to work on, we try to get together once or twice a month. And it is a mixed age group. They've got kids in, I forget the different levels, but they've got one or two seniors and cadets and something else, like roughly ages like 8 or like 9, I think, to 16. I think 16 is the oldest. So they do things together, which I think is beautiful when it comes to that multi-age mix. And in fact, my daughter is the only homeschooled kid in that group. So it's a nice exposure to traditionally schooled kids, but still having that homeschool feel where you're with kids of all ages so you can nurture and be nurtured. And then it's regularly enough that they get to know each other, but not regularly enough that it impacts the schedule too much. So you need lots of time to regroup afterwards. And they follow the kids' interests. They do a really good job of doing things that those specific girls in the group at that time are going to be interested in. Shorter interactions can sometimes be really good for our kids. The co-op that we're a part of is an enrichment-based co-op that meets for 2.5 hours once a week. Great. 2 classes, 1 meeting, lunch if you want to stay and pack your lunch and play in the gym, but you don't have to. You could go right at the 2.5 hour mark if you want to. Occasionally some extra things outside offered, and they're short interactions. Parallel activities, like maybe you're working on like building together, but you're building your own separate things, or an art class where you're all doing different art projects, but together at the table. Maybe a safer option could be familiar people in predictable settings. Like we were part of a playground group for years and years, and we just met at a different playground every single week. So it was the same people in similar situations and settings, but it was free enough that you could come and go, you could mix with different kids in the same group. And then intergenerational relationships. We've talked about this before on the podcast. Some of my kids' greatest experiences have been with like older relatives, aunts, uncles, cousins, grandparents, like the example I've given many times with my oldest and his grandfather and his train group. So sometimes that feels a little bit safer because it's easier to get along with people who are much older or much younger for some of our neurodivergent kids. Some examples of some of these ideas, you could do like a weekly library visit with the same librarian. For years, we had memberships to the Science Center and the Natural History Museum, and we would go every week around the same time. And some of the volunteers, the volunteer docents who worked there, would get to know my kids and really have great conversations with them because it was off time, so it wasn't super busy. It was during the day, and they were there because they really enjoyed those topics. That's why they were volunteering their time in their retirement, and they'd have really good conversations with kids who were interested in those topics. Short lessons with a trusted instructor. If you've got a kiddo who's talented in voice or dance or music or art or something like that, you could do some one-on-one mentorship with somebody else that's very trusted or reliable. A collaborative online interest group with support. We have that in the Learners Lab. We have classes that I teach about creative thinking, about a social and emotional skill each month. And then I do a doodle club. We have a guest that does a Lego club once a month. And then twice a month, we have a facilitator who facilitates a tween and a teen meetup where they do like online escape rooms, digital escape rooms, or play games online, or just chat with facilitated support, online groups. I've been working on some ideas for additional stuff for kids, check-ins and clubs and things like that that we can add to the Learners Lab. The Learners Lab's a great place because it's inexpensive. It's only $37 a month, and it includes everything that's a part of it. Unlike a format like OutSchool or some of the other online education programs where you pay for each class individually and you pay like by semester, you can pay month to month or you can pay annually, and you get access to everything. So you get access to the Lego Club and the Doodle Club and the teen and tween meetups and the 2 classes that I teach. And as parents, you have access to the dashboard and forum so you can ask questions and find out, get some resources and some support for working with your kids, as well as a one group Q&A kind of call, like a kind of a group coaching call every month. And then I have an OT that comes in to answer any kind of occupational therapy questions that you might have about your kid each month as well. So all of that's included, and we're only going to add more. We haven't added more in a while, but we're working on it as the need shows itself and as resources become available. So we'll add more clubs, we'll add more classes, and you'll never pay more. It's just a one-time payment for families who are a part of it. So you also have the opportunity to let us know, we'd really like a club about this if there's enough interest, and we could do it that way. I've had people ask me before, as a little side note here, if we accept charter funds, and I will say we can. We absolutely can. The struggle right now is that it's just me, and every single charter has a different, every single state has a different program, right? So if they do scholarship funds or ESA funds or whatever, they all have different programs with different application processes and different requirements. And then in states that have individual charter schools where you get the funds from the individual charters, every charter has a different set of requirements or applications. And I can very easily and quickly go through the process from charter to charter. If there's somebody who's like, hey, I really want my charter to be able to pay for our Learners Lab fees, how can I help you get involved? And you be the liaison to help me do what your charter needs in order for them to be able to accept the fees. I know some of the bigger companies and things like that can accept charters from everywhere because they have the wherewithal to hire somebody who is a dedicated person who can reach out to every single charter, and that's their only job to fill all that out. And I just don't have the infrastructure to be able to do that. So I rely on you to be that liaison for your own charter and get us hooked up with the right people and to find out what hoops need to be jumped through or what boxes need to be checked to get your charter funds honored. But I'm totally open to giving everybody that opportunity because I think like Ohio does not have that opportunity. And I think that it's a great one for those of you who are able to take advantage of those funds when you need them. And that side note, if there's anybody listening, because I know there have been in the past who are wondering like, okay, I really want to join the Learners Lab, but I don't have the budget for it right now, but my charter does. How do I get to be able to use charter funds for that? Just reach out at our email address or at the contact form on the website, support@raisinglifelonglearners.com. and let's figure it out together and get in touch with the right people so we can make that happen for you. Because online interest groups and online groups of like-minded people can be really great for kids who struggle with social isolation and solitude. It can give them a safe way to express themselves and get to know other people like them. Another way is to volunteer alongside a parent, like maybe find a cause that you and your child both believe in and volunteer together to support that cause. Maybe it's something like an animal shelter and you go weekly to help clean out the kennels or to pet the animals or to play with them and interact with them. Maybe you are passionate about children and you go to a women's shelter. Donate your time, read to the kids, play with the kids, donate your clothes, whatever it is. Find ways to volunteer together in things that are interesting to both of you. Here's the thing. Connection doesn't have to be intense to be meaningful. It just needs to be connection. And so we want to make sure that our kids don't feel shamed about wanting and preferring solitude, but we also don't want them to sink into isolation. Okay, let's be honest. Oftentimes it's us that is making this kind of bigger than it is, especially because it's not that big a deal to some of our kids. Some of our kids truly are happier alone or with very few close friends. But we worry about future loneliness. We worry about adulthood. We worry about missed milestones, judgment from others. But our kids can feel that worry, and it can turn their need for solitude into pressure. And we have to remember that social growth is not linear and it's not urgent. Our calm confidence will tell our kiddo, you're okay as you are, and connection will come when it fits. I have had many conversations with kids and parents over the years, especially at conventions, about the idea that you'll find your people when it's time to find your people. And for a lot of our neurodivergent kids, especially our gifted and twice exceptional kids, that comes later in life, like in college or in their career trajectory, because they get connected with people who are passionate about the same types of things. I recently had this conversation with one of my own kids. I remember too a conversation I had at a convention in South Carolina one year with she was 16 or 17. She was the sweetest kid. We just really connected. She came to a lot of my talks, said it was because she was learning about herself and was very interested in how her brain worked. And we were sitting down. This was one of the years that I had a couch in my booth. And we were sitting down just talking. And her eyes just welled up at one point. And she said, but when am I going to find a friend? When am I going to have a good friend? And I said, honestly, this is hard. It might not be until you get to college. But you will find your people. And there's nothing wrong or broken about you. You just aren't interested in a lot of the things that the 16-year-olds around you are interested in. And they're not interested in a lot of the things that light you up. So continue doing the things you're doing through your volunteer work and having those really solid connections with your acquaintances through your volunteer work and the adults that you get along with in that work. And know that when you get to college and you're majoring and you're in your classes related to your major, you're going to be with intellectual peers who are passionately interested in the same topics that you're interested in. And you're going to find groups and clubs related to that are going to form connections with you. That's only a couple years away. It feels like an eternity, but treasure the acquaintances you have right now who are helping to form you and helping to fine tune what you know you want to do. And then you'll have your people when you get to that. I am a person, I was actually, again, just talking to one of my adult kids about this. I'm a person who has like a handful of very close friends. And the majority of those very close friends I met after I graduated college. I didn't make a ton of really close friends because I commuted and worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3, when I was doing my undergrad. I met a handful of them in my graduate work and then in my teaching work. And then the ones that I'm closest with now, I met after I left teaching and began freelance writing and exploring publishing, podcasting, and that kind of thing. And I have one or two people that I could call up anytime and get together with for dinner in person because we live relatively close. And then the rest of my really close friends live in different states around the country. There's nothing wrong with that. I know I can pick up the phone at any time and call a couple people, and they would be there for me in a heartbeat. We have a lot of similarities and similar interests. And I know that I could get together with a couple people that I live closely with. I'm okay. And my one kiddo who's very similar to me is okay. And my one kiddo who loves to have lots and lots of connections and friends is okay. Because connection comes when it fits and it's not linear and it's not urgent. So we want to make sure that our kids know that they're not broken. They're who they are, and that's cool and important and interesting. And again, the world would be really boring if we all collected people like coins and had tons and tons of people in our lives and no real deep connections, and vice versa if everybody had one friend. And so we need lots of different things like that. Okay, some of the things that we can do with our kids in the meantime to give like a gentle check-in and make sure that it's really chosen solitude and not protective isolation. Every couple weeks, every month or so, reflect together. Ask your kiddos, do you feel lonely or peaceful most days? And can you describe what loneliness feels like and what peaceful solitude feels like? Is there one person that you like seeing on a regular basis? What helps you feel connected to different people without also draining you? No action is required in these check-ins, just information gathering. This is a chance for you to just help them reflect on who they are, what they enjoy, what they're looking for, and then also for you to understand what's going on inside their brains. Some kids bloom in groups. Others bloom in quiet corners. Our job isn't to rush them or going to be about, I love this topic because I've talked about it over the years in different settings and several friends have talked about it too. It's the idea of like social hangovers and recovery plans. A friend of mine used to call it like the hangover from fun. And I don't know about you, but I feel that way. Like sometimes it takes me a day or two to recover from the fun that I had on a day. And I've got a couple of kids who are like that as well. So we're going to talk about social hangovers and recovery plans, like how to help our kids have a social life without burning out in the next episode. I also have a download that I'm putting on the previous show notes pages for the different episodes in this series. I'd forgotten to mention it in those episodes, but I'm going to go put it retroactively back on the show notes. It is a friendship pathways worksheet. It's a freebie for this series that you and your kids can work together through to figure out how friendship and social situations work for them. What feels good, what doesn't, totally free. So you can download that on the show notes for this episode or any of the episodes related to social relationships in our neurodivergent kids. So it will be there and it will be available. I may also put it in the sidebar for a little while since I forgot to mention it the last couple of episodes, but you can get that on the show notes for any of these episodes, and all of the show notes for all of the episodes on the podcast can be found at raisinglifelonglearners.com/podcast. And so you can get resources there. You'll find on those show notes pages an article, like a blog post article about what we talked about in the episode. So if you do better reading or you like to reiterate what you hear by reading, it's not like reading just a straight transcript. It's reading an article version of what I just talked about. So it flows better in print than a transcript does, because a transcript is like the written word of what I said, and it doesn't always translate as well into reading. It's an article version of this podcast episode. And then at the bottom, there's like easier, like a summary, action steps, and then links to other resources related to the topic. So you can go over there. There's also links to our sponsors, CTC Math, as usual, over there. So if you're looking for a great math program, you can check them out either at ctcmath.com, or you can click through the link over on the show notes, because that link takes you to a really significant discount that you don't want to miss if you're seriously considering it. So if you do check them out at ctcmath.com, make sure you come back to the web pages and the podcast show notes and you click on the links on the show notes pages, because you'll get access to that discount. And yeah, we'll be back same time, same place next week with the last episode in this series all about social hangovers and recovery plans. It's going to be a good one. And if you've got an idea for other topics, let me know. I do have a lineup of guests that will be coming soon. I haven't done guest episodes in a while, and I'm excited to get back to that. So if you have an idea for a guest as well that you'd really like to hear on this podcast, reach out for that as well. I'd love to see you in the Learners Lab. I'd love to have you join Curiosity Post so I can give you and your kiddos a mailing each month. But if not, I'd love to see you here at the next episode. Same time, same place next week. In the meantime, love your kids, have fun, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye for now.